and a very warm welcome. You're watching an NDTV special broadcast on the budget and the reactions that we're getting across. We've got a mix of economists and politicians who also study the economy very closely joining us in this special broadcast. Let me just introduce you to Dr. Rathin Roy, back again after reading the budget fine print. Rupee Majumdar joins us. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you very much for being here. Harsh Madhusudan Gupta is back with us again. We've got Prasanjit Bose and our two special guests for this broadcast. We've got Supriya Shrineth from the Congress and Gaurav Vallabh from the BJP. One time on the same side of the political aisle, now on different sides. So that's interesting. I want to start by getting Supriya Shrineth to set the context for why the opposition is upset with the budget. The finance minister essentially signaling that she doesn't want too much fireworks and drama and hype and hyperbole in the budget. She's presenting this as a budget for continuity, a forward-looking budget, without any unnecessary hyperbole associated with past budgets. I saw some of the posts that you put out. Lay out for our viewers why you think this budget underwhelms you. Supriya Shrineth.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, and it's a great evening to be in good company to talk about the budget. I was very relieved to see Nirmala ji read out the budget, frankly, because early in the morning I had Donald Trump announce our economic policy, who will we buy oil from, who will we not. So I was a little, I was a little apprehensive. I hope she reads the budget and not somebody else from America. I was very relieved that she did. Quite frankly, Rahul, I've read the fine print, and the fine print is where the story really is. Who does this budget cater to? You know, there's a lot of celebration about fiscal deficit, but how are we meeting that fiscal deficit? I mean, there is a revenue receipt lower by about 78,000 crore rupees. Net tax receipts are lower by 1,62,000 crore rupees. Expenditure. The government has cut expenditure by 1,503 crore rupees. Capex has gone down by 1,44,000 crore rupees. In fact, upwards of that. So the reality is, and crucial heads, where the sectors impacted is where the story really unfolds. Health, the budget has been cut by 3,600 crore rupees. I'm talking about the 25-26 financial performance. Numbers have been drastically cut down, and for me, that is the trouble. Education, health, agriculture, rural development, urban development. And for next year, it's not a very rosy picture. The nominal GDP for next year is, of course, lower than this financial year's GDP at 10% versus 10.1%. But the real cruel action has been taken on SC, ST, OBC scholarships, numbers down there. And as far as next year's schemes are concerned, I am very shocked that the budgeted estimate for crop insurance, urea subsidy, PM Garib Kalyan, which is essentially food security, aircraft, aero, naval dockyards, how can budgets be cut down for things like this?
So you've set the context by essentially making the point that
I just want to make a very brief point, Rahul.
Yes.
There was a context to this budget. The context was FDI had turned negative. The context was that FPIs are pulling out money out of India. The context was that, the rupee has been relentlessly falling. Not a mention of any of that. And to me, that is a letdown. The finance minister needs to look at problems that face the country and put out measures to tackle them.
So let's take this argument one by one by getting Gaurav Vallabh to respond to the larger point that capital spends have been lesser than what the budget had estimated last year, which is how you're meeting your fiscal deficit numbers. So don't make it seem as if your government is being fiscally prudent. It's spending lesser on social sector, spending lesser on infra, which is how you're meeting your budget numbers.
I think it's a wrong way to read the budget number and budget document. When we say that there is a allocation of 6 lakh crore around in infrastructure, now you will say that Northeast budget got reduced. So in the infrastructure budget, there is a high-speed rail network between Varanasi and the Siliguri. So naturally, that Northeast infrastructure got covered there. When we are talking about the network between Surat and the Northeast. So that budget is allocated in the infrastructure budget. So first thing we have to understand that when somebody makes budget, anybody, it's not A, B, C, it's always on some projections. And it's not necessary that one by one paisa we had spent less and 1 paisa we had spent more. It's always on some approximations, assumptions. Budget documents are made on that. And when we are saying that 4.4% of GDP, we are having a fiscal deficit. When we are saying that 7.4% is the growth rate for FY26, when we are saying that exports are at $825 billion, the merchandise export, in spite of the geopolitical tensions, had increased by 2.6%. When we are saying that service exports had gone up by 6.5%, when we are saying that foreign exchange reserves are at an all-time high of $700 billion plus, which is equivalent to 11 months import, then also if somebody is not able to see
So
the
respond
composite
to the
picture,
second part, which is that you've had a situation where leaders like Donald Trump are announcing what appears to be Indian policy in their view, that we'll buy from Venezuela, not buy from Russia.
I think, Rahul, I'm more interested to read, understand the people from my country. I am not very fancy. I am not seeing every day morning who is tweeting sitting in Washington or Germany. I am more interested in what is my economic survey saying, what is my government is saying, what my people are saying. I will rate Supriya ji better than Donald Trump. I am more concerned with Supriya ji's tweet. But she is more concerned with Donald Trump. What I can do?
Can I make a brief intervention?
That's a political response to a budget
Can I make
question.
Not a political response.
Can I make a brief
not
intervention?
a political response.
Yes, very quickly, Supriya.
I just need to make a very brief intervention. When we talk about the Indian economy, and I'm very proud of the fact that our economy is growing. I'm very proud of the fact that we will be the fourth largest, the third largest, maybe the largest economy sometime soon. But to me, we cannot behave like an ostrich. We want to compare ourselves to the global economy. We can't suddenly say I don't care what Donald Trump says. I do, because he was your friend. You were doing Havans to re-elect him. You were doing Namaste Trump. You were doing Howdy Modi. You were doing Abki Baar Trump Sarkar. And when that man gets on the podium and says Modi is doing things to make me happy, and I'm not getting into the other worrying things that are coming out of the US. I'm only getting into things. Ceasefire is being announced by Donald Trump.
Okay.
We will buy
So,
oil from Venezuela.
this will very
announced by
soon
Donald
become
Trump.
a political
Russian
debate. I'll
oil
try and
announced by
avoid
Donald
that.
Trump. That
Let me
can't
get
be.
Ratin Roy to respond to
Rahul,
the opposition's
just a small-
charge
just a
that
small
the
intervention.
fiscal deficit numbers
Rahul,
are being
Rahul,
met by...
just 10
one
seconds, and not more than 10 seconds. I will not take more than 10 seconds. Just one data. And all of us are concerned about the global economies. There is no doubt about that. But we were number 11th economy in 2004. We were number 11th economy in 2014. Right now, we are number 4th economy. US is growing at less than 2%. We are growing at 7.4%. China is growing at 4%.
So
we are
once
growing
again,
at
Dr. Ratin
7.4%.
Roy,
What is our
this
per
What's the
capita
size of the
income?
US economy?
What is
the
our per
fiscal
capita
numbers?
numbers are
income?
being
Per
met by
capita.
cutting back on social spends and spending lesser on capacity expansion than the government had promised to do. How relevant is that charge?
Well, let me give you the macroeconomics of it. It's not true that cutting back on social spending is financing fiscal prudence. It is true that cutting back on all spending is financing fiscal prudence. To give you an example, in 2016, the total expenditure of the government of India was 0.8% of GDP, higher than it is now. And the fiscal deficit, lower than it is now. And the fiscal deficit was 0.8% of GDP, lower than it is now. In 2027 BE, the expenditure GDP ratio is 0.8% lower than it was in FY16. And the fiscal deficit ratio is 0.8% lower than it was in FY16. As simple as that. So the government has been prudent in cutting expenditure at a macroeconomic level across the board. Now, whether it should have or not should have, my personal stance, and there can be other views on this, is I'd rather have a government which is revenue constrained, be fiscally prudent, than have a government which is revenue constrained and not be fiscally
That's an
prudent.
important point
I
to
don't
make.
want
And
us to
on
be
that
tough.
note, I want to go across to Suman Berry, Vice Chairperson of the Niti Aayog. He joins us on this broadcast. Sir, welcome. You know, this point that's being made that a conscious effort has come through in the budget of trying to take the drama, the fireworks out of the budget, make it more of a statement of accounts, rather than lay out a larger framework for, say, ambitious reform agenda over the next few years. Is that a conscious effort you think that's being made to try and make this more factual and less dramatic?
I have to say I completely disagree, but firstly, thank you for having me on the program, and secondly, let me thank you for your reports from Davos, particularly the interview with Ajay Banga. So, look, Niti Aayog, I'm pleased to say, had contributed analytic work in many of the areas that have expressed themselves in the budget. And indeed, I was very pleased that the Chief Economic Advisor also acknowledged the support from Niti Aayog in the economic survey. So, how do I locate this budget in the run-up to 2047? Okay, and I don't want to get stuck in the weeds. I wasn't listening to too much of the discussion earlier. So we want to be a modern society by 2047. We think that to be a modern society, we need to approach what the World Bank calls advanced economy, and there are various numbers floating around. The point I want to make is that there are lots and lots of ways you can think of growth and accelerating growth, but given our Amrit Kal, given our demographic dividend, I find a useful way of thinking about it is to get more people into the labor force, and there's a large reservoir in the female labor force participation, which is much lower than global, and to raise their productivity. And so I look at what was in the budget as a way of achieving both those goals. There's a lot about women in particular, but you can't bring women off the farm and expect your average productivity to rise. And you need a bunch of other things, including higher investment, FDI, and all of that. So to me, there is a method, there is a logic to all the various dimensions of the budget.
If India is indeed to be an advanced
Rathin
economy by
knows the
2047,
fiscal numbers
like the
much
government
better
has
than
stated its aim to be, then we need to be growing at least at 8% real GDP, and ideally at 10 to account for a few bad years if they come along our way between now and 47. The charge that would be leveled is the government is settling in at about a 7% growth rate without even laying out an ambitious target of wanting to grow in double digits, which is what they promised in opposition.
We are still
even
not
accounting for the trouble that we are facing internationally.
And if that is an agenda for the EU, it's even more an agenda for us. So I would say connectivity and technology are the ways we're going to raise productivity, and they were both in the budget.
Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. I want to go across to Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, who joins us on this broadcast. Mr. Vaishnav, the Semiconductor Mission 2.0 was laid out. Details weren't spelt out in the speech itself, but since you're the one who's bringing that together, explain to everyone watching at this moment, how is the Semiconductor Mission 1.0 different from 2.0? Where does 2.0 land us, and in what timelines?
Semiconductor is a multi-year journey. In the first version of semiconductor, our focus was to get the entire ecosystem as much as possible into our country and to start this new industry, because we didn't have this industry before. So in the second version, our focus will be on equipment which are used for manufacturing semiconductors, the materials which are used for manufacturing semiconductors, the design ecosystem, and making sure that our startups become even more stronger in the entire design ecosystem. We would like to have at least 50 deep tech startups coming up as part of the second mission, and the talent pipeline which we have started developing in the 315 universities, that is a substantial talent pipeline. We'll continue to progress that, and of course there will be focus on the fabs, ATMP units, display, which is there as a part of the first version also.
One of the things that was said is that there will be a tax holiday for cloud services which power data centers. To what extent do you think this tax holiday might be instrumental in getting more companies to invest in data centers in India? To what extent can it influence investment decisions according to you?
The AI data centers are very key part of the AI stack. This is the fourth layer, which is the infra layer. And it's very important to get that infra layer well in place in India so that the first layer, the services providers, they can provide the services using this infra to the entire world. We think that so far we have about $70 billion of committed investment and about $90 billion, which is, 70 and 20, 90, which is announced and yet to come onto the ground. We believe that with today's budget announcement, the investment might even go beyond $200 billion basically because of two reasons. First reason is people really look at the talent pipeline which is there in our country. Second, the very stable policy regime which is there. Third, the Indian IT industry has very nicely pivoted to providing AI services. So that becomes a major strength for the data center infra providers. That married with the IT services companies becomes a very good combination. We are also seeing multiplier impacts of this. We are seeing people who want to manufacture AI servers in India, people who want to manufacture the components which go into data centers in India, and also people want to bring in coming years the AI chips also in India.
But these hyperscalers are also very energy intensive. So while we're giving these tax holidays, if you set up the data centers, at least from the speech that we heard and what we've read so far, we didn't see as much of a focus on actually building up new power capacities. You know, Elon Musk is talking about building electricity generation units in space. But is there given just how energy intensive these data centers are, is there a potential of a mismatch between our ability to produce the energy and the kind of energy that these data centers will require in the years to come, Minister Vaishnav?
This is something that we have to work in the entire planning process. There are two factors here. First factor is the innovation which is happening. I recently met a startup which basically says that energy consumption can be reduced 35% in data centers. Second is our power generation capacity. And as you know, the nuclear power is opened up now. So much innovation is happening in the nuclear power. Recently, there was one startup which is now setting up micro nuclear power projects. So nuclear power generator in a box, in a container, which can be used to provide power supply to one data center. So those kind of innovations are already happening. So the benefit of all such innovation should come to India. The data center, India should become the major AI hub. And to be AI hub, all the 5 layers we have to work in.
So the political charge that's being leveled by opposition, Minister Vaishnav, is that a lot of announcements are happening outside India. You know, the fact that, for example, President Trump announced that India would be purchasing oil from Venezuela. So how does the government look at this? That some of these announcements, the opposition wonders, are being made by leaders outside rather than being announced by our government, by our ministers. How do you respond to that, sir?
Absolutely not. All our policies are decided by our government. All the policies are very transparently made. And you have seen in the past how India has emerged as the most trusted country in the world, where everybody wants to be a partner with India. We have seen in electronics manufacturing, we are seeing it in semiconductor. I recently visited ASML in the Netherlands and requested them to look at India as a manufacturing hub. They have never gone outside the Netherlands, and they are very, within a short time frame, they are sending a full delegation to India to look at the opportunities here. And we have seen the kind of response which has come in every field, whether it is defense, it is textiles, it is apparels, it is electronics. Everywhere the world basically is coming to India because of the trust and the stable policy regime that we have.
Okay, I'll leave it over there. Ashwini Vaishnavji, thank you very much for joining us. You know, the fact is, Harsh Madhusudan Gupta, the government's laying a lot of focus on emerging technologies. You know, semiconductors, biopharma, also the fact that you're trying to build up these data centers, given what's happening, and rare earths also, rare earth corridors. Given how the world is changing, You think that's good focus? Because the opposition may say a lot of this is also sectors which don't necessarily create mass employment.
No, absolutely. They are very key strategic bets. Not all bets are linked to employment per se. So, it's not like every single investment has to create jobs. If you don't have semiconductors and suddenly there is a embargo from China or the US, it's not about number of jobs. So I think it's a no-brainer what the government is doing. We should ideally have done this more earlier, but at least you're doing this now is extremely welcome. I just want to quickly go back one point, Rahul, if you allow. We're talking about how the revenue expenditure was reduced, and that's how the fiscal deficit is contained. It's not just about the quantity, it's also about the quality of expenditure. So, for example, 800 million people are getting food grains subsidized, right? But Aadhaar seeding happened there. So, a lot of duplicates were removed. We talked about briefly NREG in the morning session and how now GRAMG, direct transfers are much more efficient. Cash transfers. Earlier, you know what used to happen? A poor person in a village had to go to a post office to get his 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, and end up paying 30% cut to the post office. Now all the money goes directly to his or her bank account. So it's not just the money that's being spent, it's also how efficient and relatively non-corrupt way it is going to the final end beneficiary. So I think even if you look at the revenue expenditure being curbed to control the fiscal deficit, it's not necessarily at the expense of the stated welfare.
So I want to go across now, live to Union Minister for Commerce and Industry. Minister Piyush Goyal now joins us. He, of course, is the big hero of this week after that very successful India-EU trade deal. The implementation hasn't started, but it's the fact that we've been able to put it together. So, Minister Goyal, you're still smiling. What's the feedback in the aftermath of the announcement of this big trade deal? How confident are you that the vision that you had when this deal was being negotiated will actually, with concrete timelines, actually lead to execution and betterment for Indian exporters looking at exporting into the massive EU market?
I think it's a fabulous budget that has been presented by Nirmala Sitharaman ji under the guidance of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. It demonstrates that our Reform Express powers on. Ever since Independence Day address of Prime Minister, we have seen more than 350 reform measures. And this budget is reflective of the speed of change and the comprehensive nature of work that is being done to prepare new India to face the challenges of tomorrow. If you were to ask me, I would call this a future-ready Bharat budget. It is preparing India to grasp the opportunities that all the other measures are leading to, including the free trade deals. It is giving wings to the aspirations of 1.4 billion Indians.
Now, I asked you also about the trade deal. You've got the big one with EU done. The elephant in the room, of course, is the trade deal with the United States. What can you tell our viewers at this moment about your assessment of when you're likely to cross the finishing line on the deal with DC?
Exactly what I told your viewers yesterday about the US trade deal.
You said basically that you don't negotiate with timelines in mind and the fact that it'll happen when it does. That's the best response that we have. I have a question on the high speed.
No. I also said it's making, Rahul, then you didn't listen to my interview. I also said it's making very good progress. And that we are confident that we should strike a deal in the near future.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about these high-speed train corridors. You know, the Mumbai-Surat corridor running behind schedule on account of land acquisition delays, which we're now trying to catch up on. We've announced an expansive expansion beyond that. Some would wonder whether it would have been better to actually deliver on the first corridor, show the advantages to that entire region which accrue as a result of having that high-speed rail corridor, and then seeing whether we want to incur these additional expenses for the new corridors that your government is proposing: Pune, Siliguri, Varanasi, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad. How do you look at this question? Deliver first on the first project and then expand, or just go in for expansion even when we get the first project going?
No, I think it's a brilliant idea to start planning for 7 more high-speed rail projects. You will very well remember that this first project, Mumbai to Ahmedabad, got delayed because when the Uddhav Thackeray, Sharad Pawar Congress government was in power in Maharashtra, by deceit if you ask me, for 2.5 years, they completely stopped work on the Maharashtra end of the project. And because of which we are seeing that we may actually finish the Gujarat end, but the Maharashtra end would get delayed, even though we are trying to catch up. I think preparing ourselves for more corridors is in a way national service. More people across the country are going to benefit from these high-speed corridors. We will have new corridors, particularly covering a large part of southern India and giving them an opportunity to travel between Hyderabad, Bengaluru, Chennai, from Mumbai to Hyderabad, various places, from Delhi to Banaras. I think it's a brilliant idea to start planning for that. As the Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train starts, we will simultaneously have high-speed corridors, the planning phase, the land acquisition phase, the financing phase being sorted out so that we can see progress and give the benefit to the people faster.
You know, interestingly, right now for our viewers, the high-speed corridor from Varanasi goes up to Siliguri. It doesn't go to Kolkata, which is where you'd imagine it will ordinarily go in the scheme of things. But maybe after the results, depending on what happens in the results, let's see if that changes. But that being said, I'm just being mischievous. That being said, on rare earths, the corridors that are being built, do you want to give our viewers a sense of, our ability to catch up? Because China controlling a large part of the most consequential rare earths at this moment, and the concern that you want to extract these rare earths without damaging the ecology and the environment.
Well, 4 new critical mineral zones are going to be developed, and I think it's a very forward-looking measure to look at the critical minerals available within the country and focus on areas like permanent magnets where we are vulnerable, given that global supply chains have a deep concentration in certain geographies. I think it's a very, very forward-leaning measure to prepare India in becoming more self-reliant and ensuring our stake in global value chains is protected.
Minister Piyush Goyal, for joining us, thank you very much. Much appreciate you taking out time and joining us. The charge that will be leveled, Suprashanit, is that if the Congress governments in the past had done some of this advanced planning like the Chinese did at that time on critical rare earths, also, for example, high-speed trains, etc., maybe we wouldn't have as much catching up to do. On semiconductors, for example, there's a lot of catching up because your governments, when they had the opportunity, didn't do their job.
So, because Piyush ji made a political point, I think it's only fair that I make a political point as well. Piyush ji can come and make headlines for all I care, but in 2016, he had announced a 60,000 crore textile package that he said will generate 1 crore jobs. One wonders what happened to that. In 2024, he said leather and shoe industry will generate 40 lakh jobs. Wonder what happens to that. While he was the railway minister, he was talking about generating 15 lakh jobs. You called him the hero of the EU FTA. Is he the villain for the 50% tariff? I wonder if that will happen. But just to answer on the semiconductor part of it, because I think it's important that we tackle that step by step. We are assembling, we are not manufacturing any semiconductor. Every semiconductor fab is an assembly unit in India. Please remember that. The second, and I will give you an example.
Correct. The new ones that are being built.
No. That all are assembly units. You could have called Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav back on the show and asked him this. Let me give you an example. $2.5 billion investment in the Micron project. $825 million will come from Micron. The rest will come from the Indian taxpayers. You know how much does it take to create one job in that fab unit? $400,000, which is close to 3.2 crore for every job created. We need jobs in manufacturing. We need large-scale jobs. Where is this budget on that? Mr. Vaishnav can come make a headline, Mr. Piyush Goyal can
Okay.
come make a headline.
Just
But
pause
the
that.
reality
Pause
is,
that. Pause
where
that for
are
a
we
second.
moving the
Okay.
needle on
You know,
jobs?
Gaurav
Where are we
Vallabh
moving the needle on big
is a
investment?
key part of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. And this charge I've heard earlier, in the case of electronics manufacturing, mobile manufacturing, it started with assembly. The likes of Raghuram Rajan made this point that the value addition is very low. It's increased over the years. But Supriya Srinath levels the same charge about semiconductor manufacturing to begin with.
Just would like to share some data rather than making allegations without seeing what semiconductor units looks like. Electronics export in last 11 years, it increased by 11 times. It is 4.25 lakh crore. So when we are saying that there is a value of 4.25 lakh crore and you are saying only we are having assembly units, it's not possible. The electronics manufacturing in last 11 years had been increased by 6 times. So how it is possible? You can't have this kind of phenomenal exponential growth by doing only assembling
And
things.
Prasenjit Bose, the value add component of manufacturing, we've seen it already with mobiles, increases over time. You have to get started somewhere. It doesn't start at 100% value addition.
No, you see, I think that the ministers, we had two of them and the BJP spokesperson.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
He's the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. That's
member
the
of
capacity
yeah,
he's
whatever.
here.
So, whatever. Those who are speaking in favor of the government, I think that have you read the economic survey which has been prepared by the? I think you should have, because the entire debate, and we have been having this debate since morning today, and we had one round after the economic survey came out. The economic survey, and I just saw the author of that, the preface at least. He was just here. And he has said that manufacturing matters. He has written that in the preface as an admission of the fact that whatever we have done so far, this government has been around for over a decade now. You are saying that why didn't the earlier government, they should have done it, could have done more. But why has not this government, which announced with much fanfare a Make in India project, why is it today having to admit that we are unable to develop our manufacturing sector, we are unable to generate
that's not
sustainable...
what they said,
sustainable,
but I'm gonna
no, that is what they said in the preface to the economic survey.
Sure.
They said that is why the rupee is going down, that is why we are having a problem with our capital inflows, that is why we are having
let me get
current
senior
account
BJP
balance.
leader Smriti Irani to respond to this point. Smriti ji, welcome. This point that's being made by your opponents who say that a lot of the focus on semiconductors, a lot of the focus on higher tech manufacturing requires a lot of money to be spent for very few jobs being created. The point being that for a country like India, you need to focus more on sectors that are very labor intensive rather than these high tech sectors which look fancy but don't create as many jobs for the amount of money required to get one job going. Smriti Irani.
I think that the budget has done a balance between those which are segments technologically intensive and those that are labor intensive. For instance, if you look at, let's say, the vertical, and I didn't have the pleasure of listening to all the panelists before I joined you. However, if you look at the announcement with regards to electronics manufacturing, if you look at the announcement with regards to biopharma and the complementary announcement with regards to, let's say, the coastal cargo promotion scheme. The idea is not to do a siloed announcement, but an announcement where there is a holistic growth opportunity. For instance, if you're talking about semiconductors and electronics manufacturing, then it is essential to enhance our capacity to produce rare earth minerals on our own indigenously. So the rare earth corridor which has been pronounced and the specific states that have been ascertained for that pronouncement also takes into the consideration the fact that we may have the third largest reserve in the world, but our global production contributory capacity is just 1%. Now, these are at a nascent stage industries where if you put in the amount of effort financially, technologically, and from a labor perspective, then you see the exponential growth, which is projected either in the finance minister's speech or as has been enunciated by the minister concerned, or for that matter, by the prime minister. But at the same time, if I look at the segment, let's say, of technical textile, HSN codes for technical textile did not exist though their economically viability or their value existed in the country. For the first time, 300 HSN codes were made by Prime Minister Modi's government. And if you look at just the numbers for 2024, there was $3 billion worth of exports. So, in let's say a field like textiles, where the Prime Minister 5 years ago had announced a 6,000 crore package for apparel and made ups, and the US market, where a lot of our companies could make inroads only on the basis of that package. Today, with the EU deal in the offing, you have a new opportunity for the textile sector. But if you look at the technical textile announcement, that segment itself is projected to grow to about 10 billion worth of exports, and it currently has employed close to 1.5 million people. If I
But
look
in the
at,
critique he offered, Rahul Gandhi made the point that investors are pulling out. Net FDI is negative, foreign portfolio investment has been negative, and the point being made is that the budget, in the view of the opposition, doesn't address that concern about trying to pull foreign investors into India, and you've got a depreciating rupee to contend with as well. How do you respond to the charge, and how concerned is the government by the fact that foreign investors, on balance, seem to be less enthused about investing in the India story than they've been in the last few years?
economically, we are not functioning in isolation. We are a part of a global community where there are many trade considerations and fragmentations that we are content to deal with. Additionally, I remember the charge of the Congress party at least a decade ago was that we are not evidencing inclusive growth. If you look at the pronouncement by the Honorable President of India recently in her address to all parliamentarians and the nation at large, you saw that the social security net has been enlarged by this very government from 25 crores to 95 crores. Thereby, the government itself has evidenced inclusive growth. If you're looking at capacities that have been built by this government, let's say in the sector of GCCs. Now, GCCs is not an economic element or sector that was spoken about, let's say, a decade ago. Today, over 2 million people are employed in that segment. Export of services also has grown thanks to that segment. And one particular issue of interest, at least for a citizen like me, is the growth of those verticals in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. So when I look at the government announcing a capex of 12 lakh crores, especially for infrastructure, or city economic region announcement of 5,000 crores for specific cities, I recognize that the government understands expanding populations, understands growing aspiration, understands that there can be a complementary ecosystem made for investment if you strengthen infrastructure in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities today in India. And that's why this particular announcement of capex is significant. Additionally, Rahul, if we today want to expand investment opportunities, will we not look at new geographies for foreign investors for that matter? So today in India, if there are 18 lakh square feet available space to develop, let's say, data centers or GCCs, wouldn't they want complementary infrastructure to be provided by local authorities or state governments? So instead of looking at a siloed approach, why not look at a comprehensive plan that the government has progressively announced in this budget?
Okay.
Yeah, Rahul,
Thank you
can
very
I-
much, ma'am,
can
for
I give
joining
a
us. Really
response to this
appreciate you
comprehensive
taking out
plan?
time and joining us, because Rumki hasn't spoken yet either. I want to go
Can I
across
take
here,
a small point?
Okay.
Because I think that, we wanted someone to respond to where we started this discussion with. For two consecutive years, I'm restating this. For 2 consecutive years, the government on budget day comes and claims about record capex spending and ends the financial year
By
next
cutting
year by cutting. Last year, it was said that it is an election year, that is why we could not. This time, capex once again has been cut, especially the grant in aid for capital creation in states by almost 1 lakh crore. So this is the problem, that you are talking about silos. It was said that, it is about nitpicking. This is not nitpicking. This is about a very substantial amount of money that you are spending to promise, and you are not ending the financial year spending it and just rolling it
Let's
over.
hear
Can I
Rumki's
just
take on
just add something to that, because you've been giving BJP voices a fair amount of time
And
on this
opposition
platform.
voices as well.
Yes, absolutely. I have no qualms with that. I'll make only 2 points on whatever I've heard. 2 ministers, 1 BJP spokesperson, 1 member of the PMEAC. We don't live in a isolated world, is what Smriti ji just said. I agree with her. But what about Indian corporates? The economic survey says manufacturing matters, and then it goes on to say that Indian firms' outbound foreign investment has gone up from $14 billion to $24 billion. Why are Indians not investing here? Investment is an act of faith. If your FDI is turning negative, if Indian investors are not investing, there is something wrong with policy. 2 budgets back, production-linked incentive schemes were announced to create 2 crore jobs. There was an internship scheme announced to create 1 crore internships. 10,000 people got internships in the last 18 months. Who is going to take stock of all that is announced? We hear hubs, we hear summits, we hear conventions, we hear institutes. 24 of them announced in this budget. Where is stock taking? And one last point I want to make, Rahul, and I think that's an important point to make. You were talking about value addition. You quoted Raghuram Rajan, and I think we went back and forth on that. India's trade deficit with China today stands at $116 billion. That number 11 years back was $37 billion. So please understand, your trade deficit with China on one hand is also complementing the value addition or the lack of value addition you're doing. So our dependence on China has gone up many-fold because the mobiles that you're assembling here, the part and components are coming from China. That's also a part of the debate we must touch because that also endangers national security.
Let me get Dr. Ashima Goel, well-known economist, to respond to this. The fact that the charge that's being leveled is that the budget doesn't address adequately the concern around foreigners not coming and investing in India and Indian money, India Inc., going out and preferring to invest in geographies outside our country. Dr. Goel.
So we've just seen the investment of a Japanese bank in an Indian financial company. And in a modern economy, you have flows in both directions. Our industry going out acquires expertise abroad, skills, exposure. So the idea of liberalization, which has been started since the 1990s under previous governments, was to allow more Indians to go out, Indian money as well as Indians. So that is very much part of the healthy development. And I think we all recognize that, developing, since I was in the MPC, I've seen in the last 3 years, 4 years, we've had above 8% rates of growth on average. And this is not just a rebound from the negative growth during the pandemic, but because of what I say, the diversity of the Indian economy, which has been increasing steadily post-liberalization. And I think this budget does a good job in supporting both services which are labor-intensive, manufacturing.
Curious to know your take on the fact that President Trump has just announced a new chair for the Federal Reserve, and given his more conservative positions in monetary policy, what the US Fed does, what kind of implications is that likely to have in the months to come for a country like India?
So I think, again, we established that in the last MPC, that we have considerable independence from what the US Fed does. And this extended period of outflows, which we are seeing, I think I had a chart earlier, which shows that throughout, there have always been periods when there are large inflows and then outflows. And again, resilience to that builds when your own domestic markets are deep enough. So we have enough domestic SIPs and other institutional inflows so that we don't see the kind of crash we used to earlier. Now, the current depreciation of the rupee is partially an answer to the US tariff threats, etc., to make our exports competitive elsewhere. But we have seen that the real effective exchange rate stays around 100. And it has really appreciated much beyond that. Depreciated much beyond that, and therefore is likely to appreciate in the future. Always these episodes have reversed. Now, because of Trump, this tariff uncertainty, etc., is going on for somewhat longer. And then markets always sort of panic. And we saw this in the MPC also during the Ukraine war and any other sort of global shock episodes. So there's so much focus on the exchange rate, so many media articles about it, and worries whenever the reserves are going down. But they always recover. The inflows come back, and we have a substantial sort of, growth story. We are one of the highest growing large countries in the world, structural, and I think we are building resilience against the Trump kind of shocks. As I said, we did well because of domestic economic diversity, and we are building that globally now by writing FTAs with other countries, increasing exports to other countries. Like shrimp exporters from TN were really from Andhra were really worried because they lost the US export orders. They found alternatives in Australia. So that is the sort of resilience which comes from diversity. And I think this budget contributes
I leave
towards
it there.
building
Thank
it.
you very much, Dr. Goyal, for joining us. I want to get a quick word in from Anand Goenka, President now of FICCI, also Vice Chair at the RPG Group, Mr. Goenka. We were just discussing the depreciation that's been seen in the rupee. So I want to start by getting a corporate perspective on that. From the lens of FICCI, are you comfortable with the rupee sliding against the dollar in the way that it has been? Or at what point in time do you think the RBI needs to intervene more aggressively over and beyond the interventions that we've seen and the support that the RBI has been providing over the past few days?
Right. I think on the rupee, if you look at the underlying fundamentals, they seem to be strong. There is a current account deficit that we do have. So to that extent, there's natural structural challenges as even came about in the economic survey. It's largely with the IPOs that have resulted in foreign investment going out. So to that extent, I feel there's nothing wrong in the underlying situation. The RBI should largely intervene in the case of just managing volatility. I think the RBI has made it fairly clear that they will let the rupee be as long as it is moving steadily in a way. So I would say from a business point of view, it makes our exports attractive, and we are fine with the rupee depreciating, at least to a certain extent. I'd say high volatility is where the problem arises.
Okay, and your macro perspective on everything that we heard from the finance minister in her 9th budget?
I'd say that really in a world of high uncertainty and craziness around the world, India has been really steadfast on reform, on discipline, and had a steady story over the years. And I think the budget really builds on that. It's focused on growth, on inclusivity, on continuity, continued focus on infrastructure spends, manufacturing focus with the few 7 strategic areas, jobs with respect to particular focus on tourism and healthcare is very welcome. And at the end of all of this, they've maintained fiscal discipline. They are putting their action where their mouth is. The FM said a few years ago that we will be at a target of 4.4% fiscal deficit and achieve that. And that gives confidence that whatever is being said now will largely also be achieved going forward in the future. So we look at it fairly positively, and the steadiness in an uncertain world really helps.
Anand Goenka, for the time, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll have a more detailed take from you later. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Rumki hasn't had the opportunity to speak. You've heard multiple things, and I want to draw you in on the depreciation of the rupee and whether at some level there is a muchka sawal, at least in a political context. The other reality is that as the rupee depreciates, it becomes easier to export. How should the government in the overall milieu be looking at the depreciation that the rupee has been seeing right now?
Thank you so much for having me here. And see, depreciation in the currency did help initially because it helped us, our exports, to remain competitive despite the 50% tariff. But beyond the point, it hurts the foreign investors because all the returns that they get are in dollars. And when they convert the returns into dollars, they basically have nothing left to take home. Now this is a time where the government realized that the capital outflows that we are seeing, the depreciation that we are seeing needs to be contained. And that's where I think the government pivoted itself during this budget towards sector where investments can come in, where the investments have a lot of potential. And if you look at all the strategic sectors, be it rare earth, be it semiconductors, be it power, data centers, these are the sectors where you will see a lot of attractive.
Dr. Roy, do you think that's the right thing to do? The RBI intervened before the budget to ensure it didn't slip beyond 92. Should the new RBI governor stay hands off as he's largely been allowing the rupee to depreciate, or because it will become a political issue, will the RBI have to intervene more aggressively?
Okay, let me answer this as non-technically as possible. We were having a conversation about this earlier. Look, it's like this. When you have capital controls and when you have a structural balance of trade deficit, the rupee will depreciate. And I would really like all those people who were making a fuss in 2013 to come here and murga karo for that reason. A lot of them are coming on your show, I notice. But the rupee's depreciation has to be an orderly and controlled depreciation. By and large, for the last 10 years, except the last 2 years, I'll come to that, RBI has done this. So my own calculations, which I've shared with the RBI, is that for about a 1% current account deficit, you can expect the rupee to depreciate by 5 to 6%. What you don't want is volatility, and what you don't want is shorting.
Gaurav,
If it-
how does someone in the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Committee look at the depreciation that's being seen, the economic and political fallout
See,
of it?
first of all, in the current financial year, it's around 6.5%, and that's controlled, as he had pointed out. It's not that it's something which is not under the control. So it may be catching some political points, but as from the economist perspective, this is the controlled depreciation.
But you heard what Dr. Roy said that in opposition it was linked to Much Ka Sawal, age of the Prime Minister, etc.
I'm coming to that. So you can make that, but when with this kind of depreciation, we got the benefits in exports also. $825 billion of exports. So there is some collateral benefits also of that. But Much Ka Sawal, only those people are going to raise this who says Indian economy is dead.
Okay.
जिसको Indian economy dead लग रही है राहुल, उनका सवाल ही बेकार है. मूछ तो हटा दीजिए.
But that's unfair, Supriya ji. Given the fact that the economy is grown at 7.4, projected to grow at about 7% next fiscal, for Trump and for Rahul Gandhi to think the economy is dead is not fair. That's not a realistic
I'm actually
situation.
quite astounded that somebody like you who's gone to Harvard believes that we should be punching at 7% and celebrating that. If we have to
I
become...
never said that.
Let
You're
me finish.
putting
Let me
words in my
finish.
mouth,
If
but
we
that's
have
okay.
to,
Go on.
you should be lambasting the government. Why are we targeting 7%? We should be aiming at 8.2 because without growing at 8.2 each year for the next 21 years, you don't get to be Viksit Bharat by 2047. That's one number. I did not speak in between, sir. Please wait for your turn.
I don't.
As far as the rupee is concerned, I want to go back to the argument that we are having. Fair or unfair, I don't know. But my Prime Minister, when he was the Chief Minister, said, जैसे जैसे रुपया गिरता है प्रधानमंत्री की प्रतिष्ठा गिरती है. Rahul Gandhi didn't make that statement. I did not make that statement. Mr. Chidambaram didn't make that statement. That statement was made by the Prime Minister not once but multiple times over. And my worry for the rupee is not as if that the RBI has been sitting idle. The RBI has pumped close to $55 billion in the last few months to defend the rupee. That's point number one. Point number two, when the dollar index depreciated, the rupee continued to weaken. We are Asia's worst performing currency. We have weakened against other major currencies as well. Whether it's the pound sterling, whether it's the franc, whether it's the Singapore dollar or the Australian dollar, we have also depreciated against some of our neighboring currencies. And to me, that is a big point of concern. So we can keep talking about the rupee ad nauseum, but because you kept making the political point about the rupee and you kept attacking the Prime Minister, linking it to his dignity, आज आपकी प्रतिष्ठा किस गड्ढे में गिर गई? आज आप हमें वो बताइए. आपको, and I think Dr. Roy made a good point that people who were lambasting today should come here because 68 to the dollar is how the rupee went down to. When taper tantrums happened in 2013,
Okay.
I was an active journalist like you. It came back to 58. We handed over the rupee to Mr. Modi at 58. He has taken it to 92. I hope he's not aiming for a century as far as rupee is concerned, like he did for petrol.
But the problem with the charge, you study finance really
So,
closely, Gaurav Vallabh. If you can level the charge in opposition, it comes back to bite you when you're in government.
राहुल, अभी प्रतिष्ठा गड्ढे, अरे भाई जिनको भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था ही मृत दिख रही है, वो मानसिक रूप से मृत है. They are dead mentally, who are seeing Indian economy as a dead economy. And saying,
लोग रोज सुसाइड कर रहे हैं आर्थिक
मैडम फिर आप बीच में बोल
रहे हैं. तो आप अब मृत की बात करेगा तो मुझे मृत का जवाब देना पड़ेगा ना. आप
I must take a break right now. This has been an engaging conversation, at least. We've had some high-profile voices from within the studio and outside. I'm slipping into a break. I'll have more when we come back. Mr. Chidambaram joins me on the other side. He's made 10 budgets. Nirmala Sitharaman very close with 9 now. So how does somebody with 10 budgets look at the one who's delivered 9 so far? Mr. Chidambaram will be joining us on the other side of a very quick break. Stay with us and I'll have a lot more voices and perspective coming up as well. Stay with us, back in a moment.